Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk.
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
Broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos.
A Microsoft MVP, Citrix Charter CTP, VMware vExpert.
And your host, Douglas Brown.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. We have a great show for you today. We have Johan, the Bearded VDI guy, with us. And I'm so excited to have him because this guy is just brilliant. And what else do I say? We love having brilliant people on DABCC Radio, right? I mean, is there anything else better than that? So I also want to say, welcome back, DABCC Radio. We have taken a little bit of time away, been busy traveling like crazy. And but I think that's going to stop here, and I have a lot of podcasts that I have recorded throughout that time, but have not had a chance to put online. So stay tuned to DABCC Radio, and I think you'll like it. But really enjoy the episode today. Johan is just a brilliant guy, like I said, and we have a great conversation. So I'm really excited to share this one with you. And of course, thanks to Johan for taking the time to do this. And with no further ado, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk a little bit about everything. So, I'll save it for the show. So here we go. My interview with Johan, the Bearded VDI guy. I like calling him that. As always, for people who don't know who you are, who's Johan and what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm Johan. I live in Amsterdam or near Amsterdam. I am the Bearded VDI Junkie, and I'm really passionate, basically, to everything that has to do with VDI. I've been working in the EUC space for nearly 20 years now. The first couple of years as a service engineer, driving around the country, building Windows NT systems and deploying Windows NT Terminal Server Edition and WinFrame and stuff like that. And since a couple of years now, I've been busy focusing on application delivery. And since VMware, I would say, made Horizons big about 4 to 5 years ago, since Horizon 6, I've been heavily focusing on designing, deploying, and optimizing everything that has to do with Horizon. So I would say I'm currently like a true VMware fanboy. But yeah, my roots are with the Citrix part of EUC, and since a lot is happening around EUC, I think it's the best place to be in right now.
I think it's always been the best place. You've been doing this as long as I have. You mentioned WinFrame, so I love hearing that word. And when I have troubles because I'll be doing sessions or talking to someone and I'll say that, a Citrix server, and I don't mean ThinApp or VDI. I mean like an old Citrix server. It could be Citrix or Horizon or terminal services or Azure delivered desktop, whatever, right? That to me is a Citrix server, right? It's like Kleenex is a tissue.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And I still remember, back then there were like running WinFrame was pretty amazing. I had like an HP Ornata, like a handheld, so like a pocket held machine with a 56K modem in it.
Yeah.
And I was able to connect through a landline to the internet and run a proper application on a handheld device, like in the late 90s, like 99, 98, 99. And back then that was awesome.
Yeah, it was mind-blowing.
It was mind-blowing. And, Citrix brought out MetaFrame with nFuse later on.
Yep.
And that was the first time you could actually leverage the power of a browser to run a remote application in. And, that blew my mind back then already.
Yep. Oh, completely. It's still, and nowadays it still blows my mind when I look at something, even a few years into it, what NVIDIA is doing, right? And to think that back then when you were, you turned off everything and within a Citrix session to, get it working across the 15K or 56K or 33 baud, K baud modem or whatever, you turned it down to 60-bit graphics and turned off clipboard mapping and drive mapping and printer mapping, you know what I mean? And so you can work
Yeah.
on it remotely. And nowadays you're doing, you're turning everything on, including, just the highest, you know, graphics you can possibly imagine, right? And that's what
Yeah.
really blows my mind. It's like, wow, you can do this across that? Really?
Yeah, I actually, I'm presenting on VMworld. I did that on the last VMworld as well on a little project I did. We built an F1 simulator based on Horizon, Blast, NVIDIA and vGPU, and one of your thin clients actually, the
Cool.
IGEL. We tried the UD3 first, and it kind of worked, but nowadays, we want to play around with 4K and a UD3 unfortunately isn't capable of doing that. So we're looking at using a somewhat more powerful thin client, but still running an F1 simulator without any latency on a thin client. That also, that still blows my mind. I
That's
think it's
awesome.
awesome.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, the UD7 is brand new, and that thing has what, dual 4K displays out and all this. I mean, just insane what you can do with the thing. So, yeah, we'll talk about this afterwards. When is this session? Is this VMworld Europe?
Yeah, so at VMworld US, Brian Madden organized like a beer, junk food, and geeky stuff session, like a little bit of vibe of Briveworm. And
Sure.
there we presented with a couple of guys on your non-normal topics, like this one.
So you mentioned, you're a VDI guy, and I hear this term all the time, VDI, but they don't mean VDI. They mean, server-based computing or in EUC. So when you say VDI, do you mean VDI? So do you mean VDI, and do you still do?
Yeah, I truly mean VDI.
Okay.
So yeah, so if you look at the portfolio of VMware, so VMware currently has like the Workspace ONE suite, which
Yep.
contains mobile device management. It contains identity and access management, application deployment, a UEM, monitoring, RDSH integration. But the thing that truly gets my attention is the fact that you could automatically create VMs that are different from server VMs. So we're talking like proper desktop VMs, and all the complexity that it brings together. So stuff like image management, connection protocol tuning, graphical acceleration. Stuff like the different types of clones that you have. It's so complex because you also need to take the whole data center part into account, and basically that whole puzzle, and eventually designing and deploying a solution that is the ideal fit for a customer. I think that's the one thing that I wake up for in the morning, and VDI is capable of allowing so many different use cases that we're like, it's like a joke, like an annual joke, the year of VDI. But I truly believe that it's going to be either this year or next year, because I don't see that there isn't a specific use case that's not capable of running on a VDI, except for like technical limitations of me, working on a submarine, or working in a cave like 2 kilometers below surface, stuff like that. So if you have physical boundaries, of course, you're probably not able to work with a VDI, but every other use case, yeah, is capable of running on it. And I think that's the power of VDI nowadays.
Yeah. That's interesting because I look at VDI and say, I mean, I think you also said it quite well too. It depends upon what the user wants and things like that. And I'm sort of torn between both, VDI and server-based computing, right? Is it a published application that we're deploying, or is it a full-blown desktop, which would be more on the VDI side, right? And if a user already has a Windows machine, let's say, then in my opinion, I don't want to give them a second desktop. But on the other hand, putting my iGel cap on and even taking my iGel cap off and just being the way I've always thought since really mid 90s is that's when a thin client comes into play, right? Where you give them a desk, they don't require a Windows machine, right? And then you can give them a full blown desktop, and then VDI makes all the sense in the world, right?
Yeah, and it totally depends on the set of applications that your customer is working with. If it's just one single traditional application, well, RDSH would probably, server-based computing would probably be a suitable solution, or maybe even a couple of those applications. But if you have a customer with a giant application set, and giant in the Netherlands is typically somewhere between like 400 and maybe 1,200, I'm not really seeing how you would be able to deploy that on a server-based computing solution without like an operational drama.
Because of all the servers that's required to pull that off?
Yeah, definitely. Try to create one pool or one farm of servers containing all those applications. You're gonna end up in the shitstorm. And I think you'll have that same or a similar shitstorm on VDI, with the exception that if one user has a conflict on the desktop with those applications, it might be that it's just only that user instead of all those users on the same server. So it will make it easier for you, but again, it totally depends on the use case.
Yeah.
We do see customers working with server-based computing, but yeah, especially with lower application numbers or with specific use cases, they have an iPad and they don't just want published applications and not another desktop running on it, because it doesn't, in that case, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. Makes total sense. I wanted to, because that's where I differ, or I wouldn't say differ, but that's the question is when it doesn't make sense, and you gave a couple very good use cases there. So you mentioned you're a VMware fanboy. I mean, I don't mean that in the negative. Obviously, I think it's great that what VMware. I've actually, to be honest with you, I come from the Citrix world, as you do, right? I work for Citrix, and I'm sitting here today talking to you because of my, being introduced to Citrix. But I take away the Citrix hat, so to speak, back to that hat I'm wearing, and say I'm so impressed with what VMware has done over the past really about 4 or 5 years, right? Since really Sanjay came in and just totally changed things. They hired Sean and Sumit Dewan, who's no longer there, but he made a huge difference, and now Brian's over there. And I mean, it's just what they've, and of course, probably hundreds of other people within the VMware EUC world that really architected a great solution. It's very viable. So I have to ask you, I get this question a lot. Hey, Doug, where does VMware win Citrix? What if a customer came to you and said, hey, Johan, we're thinking about going with Citrix or VMware. What do you recommend? How do you answer that question?
Well, again, it totally depends on the use cases. But if you purely look at a modern way of managing stuff, because look at connection protocols. They both have great protocols. Probably one would win from the other in a certain situation, and in another situation might be the other way around. But if you look at feature parity between Zen Desktop and Zen App and VMware's Horizon with RDSH and just virtual desktops, I think there's in general there's quite a feature parity. I think where VMware is aiming, had a focus on for the past couple of years, was the whole modern management thing. So, or got acquired. They created the identity manager solution, brought it all together into Workspace ONE UEM. And what you now see is that it doesn't really matter what kind of endpoint a user would like to use. VMware is able to manage that endpoint in a way that is similar to all those different endpoints. So it doesn't really matter if it's a MacBook or an iPad or an Android device or a Windows 10 machine. You'll be able to kind of, distribute a similar set of policies to all those devices instead of having different point solutions to manage them all. So I think that's a strong thing. Another thing is that VMware has a trust network, which is a foundation of different security companies who are working with VMware in the Workspace ONE Intelligence suite or solution. And that's basically one big data lake that VMware uses to do all kinds of AI stuff to authentication and security. So what they do is, if, for instance, you have a device, you currently live in Germany, you occasionally travel towards the US, but suddenly your user pops up in a certain location, let's say in China. And that's an anomaly, it's irregular behavior. And what the trust network does together with intelligence is they detect those anomalies, and they'll make sure that your conditional access rules are adjusted before you get even a slight chance of authenticating. And the whole trust network contains like virus scanner vendors and SIEM kind of vendors, vendors that do forensics, and all of those companies together bring one big security framework together with Workspace ONE as a suite. And I think that's one of the strong features of the whole solution.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'll leave it at that. You mentioned the protocols also, and that was a question I wanted to ask you about. They always talk about the protocol wars, and the protocol wars are over, and I think the protocol does matter. But we're both old consultants, right? And even though I've been doing, I got into pre-sales and then marketing. I guess I'm a marketing guy or evangelist or whatever I am nowadays. But I've always sort of kept that it all depends attitude, right? Because everything you say is, well, it all depends on use case. Of course it does, right? There's no one size fits all. But where do you see us in the where do you see the protocol war? Sort of, where does VMware Blast fall short of HDX, or HDX falls short of VMware Blast, or is it pretty much apples and apples? What's your view there?
Yeah, I truly think it's apples and apples. I've seen the F1 simulator thing. I've seen that happen with Citrix before, and it performs really good. The thing is with Citrix, if you look at the ICA protocol, it's old and it's stable, and I think it's like over 20 years old.
Yeah.
So it has developed in those years, and if you compare it to Blast Extreme, which continuously improves, with every version of Horizon that comes out, I do think if there's one thing I need to mention that HDX or ICA wins over Blast Extreme, it's probably in bandwidth consumption. And but that's something that the ICA protocol was built on from the start.
Yeah.
And but if you look at quality, image quality, I think they're quite comparable. And the thing is with there's kind of a protocol war within VMware as well, because a lot of people are saying like, is PC over IP dead or isn't it? Well, I do think it's not dead yet. On the contrary, I think VMware is heavily investing in Blast Extreme because PC over IP in itself is a great protocol, and there's a feature parity between the two. But in terms of image quality, if you have enough bandwidth and hardware to use, I do still think that PC over IP wins over Blast Extreme in terms of that image quality, especially with the lossless imagery, so uncompressed imagery that needs to be rendered and transferred to an endpoint. Yeah, PC over IP is one of the best protocols I've seen in that one.
Interesting. Yeah, I won't disagree with that. It's interesting to see what the future of Tera DG is, though, is the issue there, right? Now VMware does have sort of a subset of that. Is VMware standing on their own 2 feet, or they still require Tera DG for that, or what do you know there?
Well, you know what you're seeing here is that Tera DG is still alive and kicking.
Sure.
Amazon is using it with workspaces, and but they're using a higher version of the protocol that has a better feature set, less bandwidth usage, better graphical acceleration support, stuff like that. And if you look at PC over IP usage on when you use it in a let's say a comparable host on which you would use Blast Extreme as well, Blast Extreme can be offloaded to your GPU. So a modern GPU, like a Tesla GPU, has encoding hardware on the GPU, so you're able to offload those encoding streams to the card. And with PC over IP, that's not possible unless you have Apex cards built by Tera DG. And we're not seeing a lot of those cards being sold anymore. So in case you're using PC over IP, a lot of that encoding will be done by the physical or the virtual CPU. And so using PC over IP will increase the CPU load on a virtual desktop. And I don't see that that's like future proof, I would say.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned the endpoints. I want to change the conversation a bit to the endpoint, and of course, from a selfishly, I look at things from the agile perspective, and why do you always need a Windows desktop or a Mac desktop? I'm a Mac user, right? Although I do have my fancy little UD Pocket thin client that I can pop in there and turn it into my my iGel machine if I want to or when I need to, right? But when do you see, are you a proponent of thin clients? When do you see thin clients to be used? What's your experience with iGel solutions? Blah 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 blah.
Yeah, so that's a great question. If you have a greenfield situation in which no endpoints exist yet, so you can suggest whatever endpoint a user would be able to use in conjunction with a VDI, I would definitely go for managed Linux thin clients, because from a security perspective, there's nothing running on it except for a tiny Linux OS, which is fully managed by a managed solution. And if you compare that to Windows thin clients, they're more expensive. Windows, on average, boots up slower than a Linux OS, and also on average, they're harder to manage. It's Windows 10 IoT running on it, and the same. There are some MDM APIs and some management APIs on them, but it's not. You're not able to manage them in a way that you could do with Linux thin clients. So if you look, at solutions that you guys offering, with just like a click on a button, you're able to change whatever you want on a couple of thousands of thin clients, and I think that's a real powerful solution for a VDI. We do still see that a lot of customers are struggling with the choice of an endpoint.
And what do you think?
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but why do you think they're struggling for the endpoint? Well, what are they struggling? Do you know?
I think that mostly has to do with the user. So the user was able to have like a laptop or a big ass fat client with powerful hardware in it. I think those users are afraid of losing, what they had. People don't like change on average.
Correct.
And having a tiny device on your desk or a thin laptop, for instance, it might feel like a degradation of what you're doing. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges people are facing, because well, to be honest, if I would go to an employer, a new employer right now, and they would offer me like a thin laptop or a Chromebook, I would be less happy, I guess, if you compare that to a full-blown MacBook, because I've been a Mac fanboy for years now, and I would be disappointed if they gave me a thin client. But on the other hand, it's there to do my work on, and if I am full-blown working on a VDI, does it really make sense for me to use a MacBook to do my work on? I personally don't think that's the case. And if you take stuff like security requirements, protection of IP, stuff like that, all into account, I do believe that a thin client, or a zero client even, is a great solution, because you cannot do anything to the client.
Yeah. I totally understand you and totally agree with you. That's was always the case in the old days, is that, hey, I'm going to take away your ability, because in the old days it was sort of like a perk of the company, right? I join a company, I get a laptop, right? Well, gee, I don't own a laptop. Now everyone owns their device, own devices at home for the most part. And I think one of the other great things about what iGel's bringing, for example, is that UD, the UD Pocket, the USB thumb drive, where they just pop it into the existing. So you have this fleet of, a bunch of users, a fleet of MacBooks, and cool. You guys control own your MacBook, use it, be it BYOD or something they even give, install whatever you want, but when you log into the corporate environment, here, especially when you're remotely, right, in case there's, issues with Wi-Fi or whatever, right, or security issues, GDPR, things of that nature. Boom, now you're into a secure environment, but you didn't reduce their productivity, right?
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the use cases we're seeing. It's a great solution to work remotely, to offer a user that uses a BYOD device to run remotely. But another great use case of the UD Pocket we see is that we have customers like hospitals that are in the urge of migrating a lot of machines, replacing them with new ones. But take a hospital with 4,000 endpoints, you probably won't see them replacing all those 4,000 fat clients with thin clients suddenly. So what we do see is that hardware that's not really out of support yet, or still has like 2 years support, and is like x64 hardware, we just replace them, or add a UD Pocket to the USB port, and suddenly you have a thin client that can be managed with the same solution you can manage the thin clients with, and I think that's a powerful solution as well, and a powerful use case of the UD Pocket.
You got it. That's definitely the biggest use case that we're seeing there, is that PC conversion. I mean, we do have the universal device converter that you install, and it overtakes the, rewrites the hard drive and what have you. But you have to physically do that, and just to be able to send a UD Pocket to a remote office, or just pop the thing in, reboot the machine, and boom, away you go. That's a huge benefit. It's flexible. It works. If there's a problem, you just put another one in and off you go. You don't need a hard drive, what have you, right? It's super powerful. So, boy, there's so many. So I want to ask you about DaaS, right? So you believe in, definitely, the VDI side. You believe in remoting, what I call remoting. So, the next step in the evolution of this is, the desktop as a service. What do you think about DaaS? Are we there yet? If not, when would we be there? You mentioned Amazon, which I think is definitely, going to be a key player in the future. And back to the protocols, I've even heard rumors that they're working on a neat protocol, which ought to be pretty interesting too. Not that PC over IP is bad, right, as you mentioned. But so when do you think, what's your take on DaaS?
Yeah, so to be honest, I don't think DaaS is there yet. It's not the year of DaaS, and I don't think it's going to be the year of DaaS in the next 4 years. And I think there's there's a simple explanation for that. So why would a company convert or migrate their entire environment to DaaS? That would be either if they want to, if they want to move out from all local infrastructure they have, which why would you do that? Because it's far more expensive. If you would like to move towards DaaS because of a DR a strategy, then your server workloads need to be, on an IaaS provider as well, that hopefully has a direct link with your desktops because of data gravity. I'm not really seeing that either. Most of the customers that we visit in the Netherlands have a great infrastructure. It would be, from an infrastructure perspective, from a network perspective, they would be an ideal fit to move their workloads to, Azure or to Amazon or to IBM even. But if you look at how expensive it is to migrate your secondary data center towards a cloud provider, I'm not really seeing customers do that because of those costs. The second thing is that if you would use it for a DR scenario, if I would build a full-blown Horizon environment based on instant clones with vSAN in a secondary data center, and I would spin up like 2,000 desktops, it would probably take me an hour or so. If I would do that with Azure or at Amazon or in IBM or another cloud provider, would I get those same numbers? Because you are heavily going to rely on the service level that you agree upon with the cloud provider in order to achieve your own numbers in the SLA. And I'm having a hard time in seeing that happen. So, no, I don't think it's the year of DaaS yet. And how about yourself?
I think you're right. I don't think there will ever be a year of DaaS. I think it's going to be a decade of DaaS, meaning that it's going to be a very slow migration. I think that everything you mentioned is 100% correct. And first of all, if you're greenfield, if you're a small company, yeah, maybe you can move the DaaS because it's affordable, right? You don't have to build a data center. But if you already have a data center, you've already invested in that, right? If you're a larger company, it is more expensive. I think over time, Moore's Law will drive prices down, right? And it'll either become even or it'll become cheaper. Also, you have OpEx versus CapEx spending models and what have you, and that'll change things within how, the accountants deal with it inside a business, right? But also, I think that, you have to think about as where's your data? If your data is sitting locally, then why would you put your desktop in the cloud? So you have to move your data first, right? And that's going to be, that's an undertaking. So, it's not going to be something that's going to happen overnight or in 1 year. I think it's going to be sort of, like I said, maybe the decade of DaaS. But in the long run, and if we have this conversation in 10 years, I think it's a completely different question, right? Or we're there by then, right?
To be honest, if I were like a CIO right now and I have to invest in a 10-year plan from now to migrate my workloads to a cloud, I would probably invest my money in replatforming my applications or migrating my traditional application to cloud native applications, because it would probably in the long run be cheaper. That's my take on everything.
I would agree with that, but I think that, and this is better than, well, this is a good question for you too. I've always said, look at, and again, smaller businesses are different, but when you start going into some of these legacy businesses have been around a long time, be it small or giant, they have hundreds of applications, if not thousands. They can't migrate all this stuff to web-based applications. We have apps that are 10 years old, they haven't touched. They just work, right? But for the most part, we're being moved to the cloud, not because the cloud's cheaper, not because it's friendly, not because we like it, not because it's fuzzy and warm and sexy, but because our vendors are moving there. right? Because the world's moving there. Whether we like it or not, we're going to end up a cloud delivered world, right? Like in the Citrix world. I mean, you talk to a Citrix guy, what do they say? Citrix Cloud, Citrix Cloud, Citrix Cloud. It's like, I don't want to talk about Citrix Cloud anymore. What about XenApp? No, Citrix XenApp Cloud. It's just like, stop it. So, but my point is like, we're going there, right? So I think that you're exactly right. I would invest in that. And I think they are invested in that, but I think that there's going to be that legacy. I don't believe anything ever dies in IT. It's like, think about all the stuff that you run into. You're like, oh my God, you still use this? It might be smaller, but it's still there. So they have to account for it, right? And this is
what I walked into an ATM failing a couple of weeks ago, which was running on Windows 2000.
Yeah, exactly. It's insanity. It's insanity. So nothing ever dies. It just sort of grows a different leg, I guess. I don't know, but and this is what we have to deal with. I think that one of the cool things about DABCC, Johan, is it used to run on IIS, and IIS has a web an images folder, right? So I can go back and check out all the images back to like 98. The site was January of 99. So, but I have images that are older than that, right? And I was going through it, I don't know, 6 months ago, and I knew it was there, so I was looking for it. And I came upon and I found the WinFrame banner. And this was the banner that Citrix used on websites to promote WinFrame in the 90s, right? In the slogan, the tagline was, "We bring Windows to the web." And, you mentioned InViews, and I think what this says is that Citrix or remoting VMware, whatever, the idea of, server-based computing or what have you, remoting protocol solution is a bridge. It's a bridge from legacy to the future or to the web, right? And yes, in the future, everything will be, new stuff will be web, cloud, HTML5, HTML7, whatever delivered, right? But in the meantime, or always, we'll always have some form of legacy. And I think that's where, the idea of a remoting solution, be it an application delivered or a, VDI desktop where they get, some sort of interface. This is also what I love about iGel too, because iGel, we can create on demand in real time in a user experience that delivers, legacy, modern, VMware, Citrix, Microsoft, even, all into one interface with, essentially managed in real time, right? And but I think that's the future. I don't think we're going to get rid of things. I think we're just going to have more things. Would you agree? Or
yeah, well, and more things is especially from an endpoint perspective. With every version of like an iPad or an iPhone or a wearable device that comes out, you get new features, and people nowadays want to authenticate by showing their face to their iPhone, and we'll probably see technologies like that coming towards our corporate world as well.
You bet.
And that development goes so fast that I'm not really sure if the desktop as we know it will still exist in 10 years. Look at how the Linux world is running their applications. You have all kinds of cool container based technologies that have a minimal footprint, are cloud native by itself, and it's quite easy to migrate monolithic applications to a cloud native thing. And yeah, I'm not really. I'm quite curious what that strategy or that trend is going with traditional Windows based applications.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. But I think that, like I said, I don't think things necessarily die, or not everything. So I think there's going to be a place for this idea of remoting to bring it to this new infrastructure that you're trying to dream up, right? Which I agree with you. I don't know what it's going to look like either. I think if we did, we'd be 1 in a billion, right? So it is such a transformation or transformative time. It's such a, things are wide open. 10 years ago you could sort of spot today in some ways, right? But today it's even murkier than I think it's ever been because of the web, and also these, the kids today too, right? They think completely different than you and I do. They grew up with, iPhones and touch screens, and and like you said, touch ID and facial ID, and they have a different requirement. I need a desktop. Don't take my desktop away from me. Be that VDI or local, I don't care, but don't take it. I need it. where the kids today, they don't understand it. They don't want it. They're not used to it, right?
No, that's definitely true, and it's another obvious thing that we're seeing is if you take countries like South Africa or African countries in general, the whole PC era was didn't really exist in on average. Corporates like companies in the African countries, they used PCs, but people in general they didn't really do that, and so you see that a lot of people have mobile phones. The infrastructure in Africa is built for mobile phones. They don't have expensive landlines or stuff like that, but everyone is used to mobile phones. So you see the whole mobile adoption increasing in those countries as well, and I think that's a really interesting trend we're seeing there. If you compare it to Western Europe, where where we're all waiting for fiber to arrive in our homes. While I think that if you see that ISPs are probably more gonna invest in 5G and 6G later on, instead of delivering those landlines based on fiber optics to every home in for instance where I live. So I think that's an interesting trend that we're seeing as well.
Yeah. So well put. Hey, I want us to start winding this thing down. You recently wrote a book. I want to talk about. I want you to share with what this book is about and where people can get a hold of it and things like that. So can you share what this amazing? I've heard great things about it. I haven't got my hands on one yet.
Yeah. So the book, I did the VMware Certified Design Expert certification a couple of years ago. And I was the 14th globally to achieve the certification, specifically on desktop and mobility stuff. And the certification, you have to design and deploy a enterprise-grade VDI, and that design you have to defend it to a panel. And if the panel finds your way of thinking, the methodology you use to create the design, and to defend your requirements and the decisions you did. If they find it sufficient, you'll achieve the certification. And since I did the certification in 2016, only 2 new people achieved the certification after me, and that's far too less, or far too little. So one of the reasons I wrote the book is to increase the number of those certified architects, because I truly believe that having more people skilled on that level and more people using that methodology will help build solutions that users and customers are really satisfied with. I think that was one of the first goals. I would say the second one was that building a VDI or designing a VDI based on what we knew in 2014 with Windows 7, with traditional storage, stuff like that, has changed dramatically. So look at Windows 10. The way Windows 10 needs to be managed, needs to be updated, is somewhat different of what we did back then, especially if you look at the iteration of updates you need to run. Windows 10, if you're not using LTSB or LTSC, and I hope like a lot of listeners aren't using that, you need to update the base image, like, to be honest, maybe even every month. And instead of like building one base image and updating that single base image every time, my advice would be to completely rebuild it, script it every month. And that's one of the examples of something that's different than what we did 4 years ago. The same with graphical acceleration. Nowadays, Windows 10 is expecting a GPU in the system, and if there's not, if the GPU is not in the virtual desktop, your CPU and your RAM will emulate the GPU, and that has a direct performance impact on the virtual desktop. And that's again a great example of something that changed dramatically in the last 4 years. So what I did with all such features, like stuff like NSX, integration with antivirus, HCI, so stuff like vSAN, it's becoming a standard in VDI, but there wasn't any proper documentation on how to design a VDI with those features in mind. And I approached a couple of guys from the community, that like Sean Massey and Marco van Bachem, Ray Heffer, some guys from NVIDIA, and all those guys together helped me to create a baseline, I would say, that can be used to write a proper design with all those different features in mind. And the book helps you in making the right decisions based on the requirements you might face. So, I'm explaining what kind of failover or DR scenarios you could come across, stuff like cloud or multi-data center environment, or even DR to a DR scenario, stuff like that, or a DR solution. And I'm hoping that I could help future architects build a solution that, in most of their scenarios, the customer will have a great user experience at the end. And I think that I succeeded with that. So that's really, really cool.
That's great. I've heard great things about it, and I can't wait to get my hands on one. So I should just buy it. If you can get it on Amazon, right? Well, if somebody wanted to get one, what are they?
Yeah, so if you go to VDIDesignguide.com or to my blog, viahoyan.nl, there's a link to the Amazon shops. And I think nowadays it's sold in Amazon in the US, in Britain, in Germany, Spain, I think even in Asia.
Cool.
Yeah,
well, that's very impressive. I know what it takes to put together a book, and it's not something you do over a weekend or over a couple weekends or even a mini weekends. So
no, dude,
many kudos to you.
You guys, like the I would say almost the old school community guys, like you and Sean Bass and Brian Madden and Gabe Knut. You guys inspired me of writing the book like it is right now, and it probably won't be my last book. So yeah, it's hard work, but at the end it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And the end result it's so worth it.
Yeah, it really is. And when you get done, you kick back and look at it, and you say, "Look what I did." But the just to know that the feedback you get, and to know that it helped somebody is worth every second of the time. And so guys out there listening, definitely check out Johan's book. It's really, really great. Like I said, I've seen it. I just haven't had the chance to read it yet, and I need to. I look forward to it. Hey, Johan, thank you so much. I've taken a lot of your time. Guys listening, we're actually recording this at nighttime. So Johan was nice enough to take his night to spend with us and record this podcast. And for me, I'm going to hopefully, Johan, are you home? You going to relax and home for a little bit for the night?
Yep.
Cool. I'm going to go across the street to the pub and have a drink and relax. So I'll buy the book, but I want it signed. That's
I'll definitely make that work.
Yeah, that's what I want. That would make me very happy. So on that note, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, dude.
Yeah, thank you. We'll bring you on more often. I've really enjoyed this conversation. You're a good guy, fun, smart. I love smart people. So
awesome.
On that note, thank you so much.
Beard, you know what's even more what's better than smart people? Bearded people.
I've been trying to grow a beard forever, man, and I can't do it. Well, actually I can, but it takes me like 2 months for it to come in enough to where it doesn't look like a punk ass kid. and nobody allows me to get that far. So back in about 2012, actually, I was sick. So I stayed home. I didn't do any travel for about 2 months. And so I grew a beard, and I got these great pictures that I show it to people, and they're like, "Who's that?" was like, that's me. And they're like, oh, shave the beard. I was like, come on, man. I love the beard. But I tell my girlfriend every year, I was like, I'm going to grow a beard this month or this winter. No, you're not. Damn it. So, yeah, I'm jealous. Okay, I'm jealous. So, I'll leave it at that. You got me there.
Good, cool.
Okay, take care, bud.
Yeah, you too, dude.
Okay, that concludes another successful episode of DABCC Radio. As always, I want to thank my guest for today, Johan, and thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I look forward to having him back on. I think I'm going to bug him sometime in probably February and see if we can get him back on and talk about what's going on in 2019 and his predictions and things of that nature. So just a brilliant guy. And what else I say? Definitely check out his book. If you have not already got it, get your hands on one, Amazon.com. And I think you guys are very much like it. On that note, of course, I want to thank each and every one of you guys for listening to DABCC Radio. If you like it, please tell a friend. Like I said, we're back from a little hiatus and we have tons of podcasts in the queue. So stay tuned. We'll have a lot more for you. But as always, thank you so much. But what else do I say except for have a nice day? Have a great day and happy holidays to you. It is a great time of year. It is that great time of year. It is the holiday season. Joy to the world. So thanks everyone for listening to what? DABCC Radio.
CC?
DABC.
Say it again. DABCC.
DABC.
Can you say it again? DABCC.
DABC.
How about DABCC?
DABC.
DABCC.
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 DABCC.